Michael, I just wanted to say I'm so proud of you. It's nice to see you enjoying yourself. I hope you see new things. I hope you feel new things. But most of all, I hope you understand that this time is yours. Love, Mom.
See the world like an insider with Chase Sapphire Reserve. Make more of what's yours.
Welcome to LA Times Talks at the Chase Sapphire Lounge. I'm Matt Brennan, Deputy Editor for Entertainment and Arts at the Los Angeles Times. Thank you so much for coming out this morning. I am so lucky I drew the longest straw possible to get to moderate this panel with a real icon of American independent cinema, Richard Linklater, and one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, Glen Powell, who co-wrote, Richard directed, and Glenn stars in the new movie Hitman, coming later this year from Netflix. Please join me in welcoming them up to the stage.
Hey guys.
You really know you've made it when you have a bodyguard on the way to a stage. That was very humbling. That was great. That was very cool.
Thank you guys so much for being here, and congrats on the film.
Yeah, great to be here.
So this film is based on Skip Hollandsworth's 2001 Texas Monthly story about the main character that you play, Glenn, Gary Johnson. I'm wondering, how did you come upon a 20-some-year-old Texas Monthly article and decide that you needed to make a movie out of it?
I mean, Texas Monthly is Skip Hollandsworth in particular. I think is one of the greatest journalists we have, and every article he writes is just everything feels like a movie when he writes it. Every character is just teeming with life, and I stumbled upon the article through Michael Costigan. And he sent it to me, and I read it, and I immediately was like, wow, this is like such a fascinating character, and it was such an interesting, a guy that just seemed like he was wrestling with a lot. He just didn't seem like a linear character I'd ever seen before. So I kind of chewed on it for a little bit, and then I hit up Rick, and I said, hey, there's this like really interesting article. And he's like, yeah, man, of course I've read that artitle. Like, how long ago? Like 20 years ago?
Yeah, I read that when you were in junior high.
So
And I'm friends with Skip. I did a film based on another one of his stories, Bernie. So yeah, but
I mean, and basically we kind of talked it out, and he said, I just don't know if there was a character there, but there was really not a story. But I said there was like this one line. There was like really like a small little paragraph about him meeting this woman who was in danger. Her husband was kind of abusive, and she was contemplating killing him. And Gary, struck up this sort of friendship and relationship with her, and basically convinced her not to kill her husband. And I was like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like this is our story. Like,
that's
this
kind
is
of the end of his article, which when you see the movie, it's less than halfway through. Because there's a certain, we spent day in between what Glenn just said. There was probably a couple weeks of us just kind of talking about the character, but it was like, it's kind of the same thing over and over. He meets someone who wants to, kill someone. You play your part, and then you arrest them. You get the money. It's funny, all these characters, but there was a certain commonality that didn't really go anywhere. It didn't have a third act. Maybe didn't even have a second act. It was just the same. So it was only when, Glenn said, well, what if, because I was thinking, this story, I hadn't even allowed myself to imagine us kind of taking a flight of fancy with it. But, once we focused on that, it's like, well, what if she called him back up and thanked him for, she got therapy and her life's better. She left her crummy husband. And then what if she called him back, or she sent him a text and, like, invited him to something? It's like, and he liked her. And then we realized, she thinks he's a hitman. He's trapped in that persona, but he likes that persona. Yeah, so anyway, we were just off to the races.
Well, it was always like a fun idea, just the idea of, someone who emulates humanity but doesn't really have humanity, end up finding humanity by this
He
mask.
lacks passion. He talks about it, and he teaches, classes. He talks about it theoretically, but he drives a Civic, and he's this little nerdy guy who stays home and grades papers.
My favorite debate of the entire movie, the
It's
only
like a
thing
body
that Rick and I never agreed upon was of what is a car that lacks identity. We were trying
we
to.
spent more time on that than anything, because I don't want to insult any car.
Yeah, we were
makers,
like,
but we do want to make fun of it. We polled the entire crew because we
Yeah.
didn't have to do that till
I was
later.
like, what about a Nissan Leaf? He's like, I drive a Nissan Leaf. Wait,
Yeah, it's like, no, we can't do that.
can't do that.
It's like,
We're
oh,
we don't want to hurt the environmentalists.
And there
we
were
love
some
them,
obscure cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about that? Yeah.
Probably
What's
the biggest disagreement we had on the entire movie is
Yeah.
just. But we went with the Honda Civic.
What's
Sorry,
the one
Honda
that
Civic
has
drivers.
the Rolls Royce kind of front? Oh. God, I'm forgetting a car.
We're
it's
just
like
gonna
a car
bash
that
all
has
these
a little
cars.
thing, and it's like, well, no, they're terrible, but it's like they're kind of trying. They're not even.
Yeah.
That has to be more bland than that. At least they tried to do something cool. Anyway, what we did end up with a Civic.
You were talking about the PT Cruiser?
PT
Yeah, yeah.
Cruiser. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. Yeah.
Too much personality in a PT
no
Cruiser.
offense to a PT Cruiser.
I mean, I was going to ask you about your writing process, but I feel like we've just gotten a glimpse of it live on stage. So I'll pivot to a slightly different question. Glenn, this is sort of your first official screenwriting credit. Rick, I think I tried to count. I think this is your 16th feature that you've written.
What 16 have been made. Rest assured, I've written 35.
I'm wondering what Glenn taught you about screenwriting in this process.
Well, I call Glenn, he's like Sid Field Jr. over here. No, I don't think either of us taught each other anything. We just kind of pushed each other and pushed, prodded, and riffed. We have a good time. We laugh a lot, and it's an all-encompassing thing. Writing, you're making a film like this. We encompass so much. That's what made it such an exploration. Such a wild character he's both in a classroom and he's in contemplating murder. So it ran a gamut. It was so much. There was so much to express here. So, and I don't know.
I think one of my favorite things about writing with you is how circuitous it is. There's no you get a call from Rick and the hours are pretty general. I don't think we ever really chose times. We'd kind of find.
You wanted to.
Yeah.
Hey,
I'm a
I
little
get a
more
call from
linear
your
that
son.
way.
Hey, I'm good 2 to 5. I'm like,
And then we start a conversation and you don't immediately jump into writing. It's not like, okay, here's what we're trying to tackle for today. Rick would, talk about his day. He talked about a weird interaction with a neighbor or something he thought about, or, an old, he played baseball back in the day, and he's like, yeah, an old ball player visited me, and this is the weird thing he was telling me about his family, and we just kind of all of a sudden it all come
but
back
it's
to
not
Hitman.
digressive. I think it's always in the arena of something,
Yeah.
the spirit of what could be in our movie, what could infuse it. A lot of that, little characters grow out of that. We just see what lands with the other person. And Glenn, I don't know, he besides opening it up to this fictionalization of these characters, I don't know. He was up for anything, and really, we pushed each other to. We realized we were kind of, we're sort of in a film. At some point along the way, your genres come into focus because, you start off, we're just making a character piece, right? But at some point, we're like, this is kind of a film noir, It's got that, but it's definitely a screwball comedy too. The way we're approaching it. If we do that with her, it's more screwball than she starts off with film noir, femme fatale, but she's not. We've seen that, A lot of it's just I've seen that before, So we're in a genre, but you nod to the genre and then try to do something else, and that's a fun mashup. Film noir, crime, and screwball comedy, So.
There's a scene that's almost like a riff on a silent comedy that I won't spoil later in the film that is one of the most delightful things that I've seen in a long time. So, well done. Yeah, the phones. I literally wrote in my notes, delightful in all caps.
We worked on that scene for so long.
Yeah, because it's there's a lot of
Audrey,
interesting moments. I mean, when you are making sort of a crime thriller, I would say that there's a lot of things that we talked about, which is the crime architecture that you kind of have to honor and like to kind of paint your character into a corner that they can't get out of. And that's where an audience kind of invests in a very interesting way. And I think we both painted our protagonist into a corner that we were like, we'll see how he gets out of this. And that's the fun of, I think, that scene for a lot of people is I think that's why they love it is there is no exit door in sight, you know.
Yeah, and Adria Arjona, who's our, you know, she's missing. She's in London shooting Andor, you know, you can boycott that show. You know, she should be here. I'm so mad at them. So
Oh, jeez.
she's really such a special.
That'll be the headline on the
Yeah.
story.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know,
No,
No.
she really
they
is.
didn't let
It's,
her out. But she's here in spirit. You know, but she is the special rocket fuel. I think so much of this.
your process is so interesting because Rick basically brings actors into the fold like I've never seen any filmmaker do ever. And what it allows actors to do is have their hand on the wheel, their hands on the reins, and really say, okay, this is your character, and really breathe life into it instead of just, you know, occupy the words for a day or two. They really get to have ownership over it. And I think that's why the characters feel so lived in. And I think Audria, you know, that was a character that, you know, we didn't want that to fall into a trope. You know, we knew that character had to feel human and torn. And I think Audria really brought so much to it in terms of the complexities of that character and how the complicated relationship the audience is going to have with her.
And the challenge to be, I mean, Gary was a real guy. I mean, I knew him. And we had that. It was in the article, it was in the character, and her is kind of an imaginative ride on our part. So that's kind of fraught. It could become cliches. It really required her to kind of ground it and make, you know, so that's what she brought to it. You know, made that a real person who's doing some really bizarre, questionable things.
Andor is so lucky. You can continue watching the show, just not this week.
So Gary's strategy in sort of trying to corner these people who are coming to him to have people killed is to create a character that's sort of built around having researched the mark. I'm wondering how you came up with Gary's characters. Glenn, I have never seen anyone look like they're having so much fun in a movie than you playing all of those different. What was the idea generation process for each of those, like short little sequences, but with like a very particular type of guy?
Well, that's what Skip's article is. It's this series of busts of, you know, you could call them sting operations, you know, so that's there. But, so we knew we'd have a lot of that. But Glenn really just went to town. And Gary did disguise his voice. He did kind of change his appearance a little bit, but like probably 1/100th of what ends up in the movie.
I mean, the other interesting part is that, you know, this myth of the hitman, you know, that retail hitmen exists. So, you know, when you think about people's fantasy, what they're expecting to see across them as a hitman, you have to play into the client. You know, the hitman comes from the client and what they want to see. And so what we did a lot of is, you know, stealing from pop culture. You know, you take the person and the place that they are, the socioeconomic level, the fantasy, what the plight,
what will they believe as a professional hitman?
and what they're you know, and also like the fantasy of like, you know, if you have a bored housewife, you know, who wants to kill her husband for, you know, the insurance money or whatever it is, it's like, what does she want to see across from her? And that's where we really got going, where it's like we got to pull from books and we got to pull from movies and friends of ours and you know, and just imagination. It was like, it really was absolutely the best time I could ever have on a set, because that's a dream for an actor, just getting to throw stuff against the wall and just play, you know.
One of the things that I think to me, the movie is a movie about acting as much as it's a movie about hitmen, because hitmen don't exist. And it also is maybe, in a way, a movie about the difference between acting and lying. And I'm wondering, is there a difference? If so, what is the difference between acting and lying for two people who make a lot of movies?
Well, let's ask the actor who's lying. No.
Who's lying?
Yeah, no, it is. There is someone called it a Russian doll of a scene. The one you described. There is a scene in the movie where we have two actors, Glenn and Audria, who are acting these characters professionally, and then they're in the movie they're acting specifically because they're under surveillance. So you got like 3 levels of acting going on in one scene. So the whole thing's a kind of a commentary on that truth. And they're lying. Once you assume a persona, a different person, your whole life is a lie. Or you could say a character you've assumed. So did we even use the word lying so much? It went beyond it. It went so far beyond lying. There's not even, you're both technically lying to each other a lot, but such is love.
I think there's a runner in the movie also that is the as if principle, and it's something I think about as actors. I mean, I'm not like a method actor, or anything, but I do try to keep like a certain energy on set if I'm playing a certain kind of character. I'm not like, I mean, Rick's never talking to like a fake hitman on set. We're Glenn and Rick.
Yeah, you couldn't take it too serious. You're a fake hitman.
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
a real
yeah,
hitman, I could see like, ooh, I'm dialed into my character. I'm a stone cold killer. It's like you're a college
Glenn.
teacher.
Yeah.
This character. You're
Get
acting
over yourself.
like a hitman.
I don't. But I will say the one thing that, as an actor, that is really fun is when you get to kind of step into these different worlds. What you do find is the lens in which you see the world shifts a little bit. And you do walk differently, you talk differently. The way you interact with people is different. And I think what was interesting is we were talking about during the pandemic, a lot of people felt stuck kind of in their identity, in their lives, who they were married to, and the lives that they've made for themselves, and they really wanted something new. And this was like a very interesting reset in life to kind of do that. And we kind of took that general universal idea and said, it's not really a lie. We are all multitudes, there's all these different things inside of us. And sometimes you go to a thrift shop, you put on a different jacket, you just start walking a little differently. You start talking a little differently. You put on a pair of sunglasses that are a little more loud than what you normally wear, and the world interacts with you differently, which causes you to interact with the world differently. And I think that was kind of the contemplation. It's not a lie. It was more of an expression that was in you, but you've kind of subscribed to a different identity just because of the sense of the world has kind of put you into this corner, and we have the opportunity to be whoever we want to be.
Yeah, that is the theme. Can you change? Can a person change? We see him actually change to whatever degree from Gary to Ron. He assumes a new persona and becomes that to a significant degree. So that was one of the things we were thinking about a lot.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the setting. I used to live in New Orleans for 10 years. My bold claim about this movie is that it's the most honest depiction of post-Katrina New Orleans that I've seen on screen. Wow. People who actually have lived there. So, one, how did 2 Austin guys take an article set in Houston and decide to take it to New Orleans? And then how did you end up at this particular arrangement of places where you sort of avoid the obvious spots like the French Quarter and go elsewhere in the city?
Yeah, well, just when you go to make a movie, I guess New Orleans is, everyone knows New Orleans in a certain way. It's in the national consciousness. And I was like, you go in, just the way you would study a genre, you study how a city's been depicted. I remember thinking, like, what makes a good New Orleans movie? What makes a bad New Orleans movie? And I have enough lifetime friends in New Orleans. And you talk to them about movies. Oh, anything but, they'll mention some movies that just make them cringe. So I quickly came to like, okay, we're not going to show any crocodiles, snakes, no voodoo. We're not going to set the whole thing in the French Quarter. We're not going to, my friend Henry, our friend, he said, no one in a New Orleans movie, no one ever orders a chicken sandwich. I'm like, that says it all right there. We're going to be the chicken sandwich New Orleans movie. He lives in the suburbs in the most boring little brick house. The house you guys get to in the end is New Orleans, but it's in post-Katrina. It's one of those shotgun, kind of faux shotgun houses, but it's a newer house, but it's kind of like a McMansion shotgun house. You could talk about gentrification. You could talk about post-Katrina. So all these were interesting, but yeah, we weren't in the quarter. We weren't, no voodoo, no. So I just got what the locals really, most people just want to be seen for kind of a certain amount of what they are without a lot of BS lathered on top. So that was the approach. But was that
I think what was also interesting when we were talking about where to set this, because obviously, we kind of moved it from Houston. One of the things we loved about New Orleans was, one, just sort of the anonymity of New Orleans. Nothing ever seems out of place in New Orleans. It doesn't matter what you see. It all seems like it kind of belongs there. So it gave me sort of the liberty to play all these crazy characters and have you kind of go, yeah, that seems right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, like, we say it in the movie, but murder seems always on the table. There's something about being next to a swamp that feels like you can kind of get away with it, that I thought was really interesting. I think the other thing is that, Gary Johnson is a guy who's sort of going through an identity crisis throughout this movie. And, New Orleans in general, it's like all these different parishes and personalities that are all clustered together, and it is everything and in all in one place. And I think Gary, it was kind of indicative of all these different expressions, and I think the color of New Orleans was such a secret weapon of this movie at the end of the day.
Yeah, I always said the metaphor was, New Orleans, just the best people. And the movie's literally these great characters, these great people, but just on a bedrock of kind of lawlessness, danger. That was always, that hovers. There's a certain, the police are.
You
slow to
really
respond,
pulled it off.
perhaps. Yeah.
You really pulled it off. So
Well,
I'll thank you as a former New Orleanian.
Okay, well that's good to hear. That's our first
I won't
New
speak for
Orleans
all of them.
feedback. Yeah, you can't speak for all New Orleans.
I do want to. You both have so many irons in the fire. I want to talk about some of your other projects. Rick, can you give us an update on Merrily We Roll Along?
Wow. Update? Yeah. See you in 18 years. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to see the Broadway revival yet?
I
or
did. I saw it when it was downtown.
What did you think of
It's
it?
good. It's a very good, one of the better. I've seen that play a lot over the years. But yeah, it's excellent. It's excellent.
And Glenn, can you reveal anything about Hangman's future in the Top Gun franchise?
That is all classified.
I was duty bound to try.
We'd have to kill him.
Just
have
one.
to kill him. Please
just
don't do that to
one
Glenn.
other question. Glenn, you're about my age, so you probably have seen the original Twister on television, on cable, like 17 million times over the years. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how Twisters compares to, dovetails with, draws on the original in your view?
I mean, I can't really say too much about it, but I will say that this movie, like, the one thing that I really loved about the original is just sort of how the metaphors of what we run away from and what we run towards, kind of paired with that, husband and wife going through a divorce. And I feel like we have a really, really wonderful entry point into this movie that is equally as powerful. And I've seen most of the movie. It's very, very good. So see you July 19th.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you both is to maybe make a little bit of a judgment of Gary. So there's a moment in the film where a defense attorney sort of accuses Gary of preying on the people that he has sort of selected to try to, trap in this deal. Do you see him in that way or not? Do you make a moral judgment about what he's doing?
Well, you kind of, when you say he selected, they selected themselves by trying to have someone, by shooting their mouth off at a bar or whatever, saying they want to have someone killed. And thankfully, law enforcement has to respond. And thankfully, there aren't really real hitmen out there. We should all breathe a sigh of relief. But yeah, you got to do something. But it does beg the question, and that's why we include that in the movie, because that is the defense. You're taking mentally unstable people who are in a desperate moment, and you're pulling them into a sting operation. Like, you're pulling them in. I don't know. I'm of two minds. Yeah, I wish there were better ways, but you got to take that. You have to take that serious. Other people are desperate and unhinged and don't want to kill people, or aren't pretending. But the conviction rate isn't. We show this in the movie too. That sometimes it's a couple, and they get back together. They forgive each other. I know. It's hilarious. The movie's a comedy, kind of. It's a dark comedy. People at their most desperate moment wanting to do the worst thing you could possibly do, and yet there's something very vulnerable and I don't know where law enforcement fits in there. It's a rich area for sure, but that is their defense. This guy is a horrible person. you're an
He's talking about the character, not me.
Yeah.
Like, damn, Rick, why do we have to do this in front of everybody?
But that is the thing, and you have to just sit there and take it. But Gary was like that. He'd show up in court and just go, yeah.
I'm also glad because we kind of we didn't go like back and forth, but there is something really interesting about showing the other side of it, how people in these desperate times, whenever you have a defense attorney kind of making a point about the morality of what a guy is doing, you know, that was also sort of the loneliness of a guy who is excited in these expressions of himself, and then pairing on the other side, there's a loneliness there. You know, there's an isolation to his sort of that expression being put down that I think is kind of a wonderful flavor to really highlight, you know, his relationship with Madison, which is Audrey Arjona's character.
One last one, and I'm going to steal it from your script, so thank you for doing a little of my work for me. And then I'll toss it out to the audience. So the question comes up in the film, and I'm curious what you all have to say about it. What is the biggest difference between the real you and your occupation? Rick? You wrote the question.
It is. What is it? Well, she's asking that very specifically to someone whose occupation is the worst thing you could be in the world. I don't think what I do is it that outside of normal person area, making films about people. I don't know. What's the difference? We should answer this about. What's the difference? There is no difference. I live my cinema. It's all one and the same.
It is really fun to see Rick on a film set, especially as long as he's been doing this, to see you and I both are the happiest we are ever on a film set. You know, that is our greatest expression of ourselves, because I also feel like the film set is such a wonderful, sacred place, because you are getting to express yourself in a way that in the real world is not as safe, and it's not, there's no real point. You know, we all have this desire to kind of be heard and to kind of show people parts of ourselves that maybe the real world doesn't bring out of us. And I think that in this movie, you know, I get to have conversations with Rick that are way more in depth than the real world will bring out of you. And I think it all kind of filters into a movie. You know?
That's what's so magical about making films. So everybody's here. It's kind of, we create this alternate universe where everything's important, but it's just stuff we're interested in. It's not the pettiness of the real world. And so I guess to answer your question, it's like I'm at my best within what we do. And then the other thing is just like life, you know, it's awkward. You know, I'm awkward in it sometimes. I'm just not comfortable. And, you know, it's what you do. You have a full life, but I do feel most, you know, comfortable, I guess, on a set. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, there is something safer about expressing yourself behind lines and a mask and a character that the real world makes you bleed in ways that a movie set can't make you bleed. I find the movie set a very safe place.
Always. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's very much in alignment with Gary's journey in the movie, too. Sort of coming alive, so thank you. Mm-hmm. I think we have a little time for some audience questions. Do we have right here in the front?
I can tell you guys are just such good timers. I'm almost jealous because I want to hang out with you guys. You just seem awesome, especially after the PT Cruiser tangent.
I'm sorry.
So I just want to know, are there any moments on set where you guys just lost it, whether it's from a scene with like over-the-top antics or an inside joke? You know, obviously, I'm sure you guys are intensely focused, but was there a moment where, you know, in between takes or whatever, that you can share that was a really fun moment?
Lost it like so fun that we lost, or
just
or
some
things
kind
went
of just
haywire?
you guys seem to egg each other on so much. Like any other fun stories from
Our
set?
rehearsals are actually more lively.
I'll tell you one of my favorite
wanna
moments
hear.
is that so Rick's process is he brings all the actors together and we all sit at a table, you know, in we had like a firehouse or in my house, and we just sit around and we read the script over and over and over, and again, it's the funnest thing because the stakes are low. You were just throwing stuff against the wall and just everybody's trying to test out their character, you know. And the thing is, we got to game day on a lot of these characters, and Rick and I had talked about them conceptually, and we had lines, but really, and we'd done some like kind of broad strokes looks in the hair and makeup trailer, but I had never shown them to Rick.
Yeah, they hadn't been fully manifested because we didn't have that time or money. It was like, oh, we're going for this with Dean or whatever. Yeah, so every time one of those guys stepped out of the van, keep going.
Well, we'd step out of the cast van. I'd step out of the cast van, and Rick had never seen these characters in the fully form. So there was a couple characters, particularly this Dean, who's this like redheaded nightmare, and then this like Russian character that Rick.
Yeah.
The joy that these characters gave Rick seeing them for the
Me
first time.
and the whole crew.
Yeah.
You know, but there was one who played the redneck guy. There was a while no one recognized.
Oh yeah, nobody recognized me. Everybody was like, "Yo, who's this
felt
guy?"
like you a team for a roadie? You know, like who were you? You were
It's probably the most
guy
method I ever got.
Yeah, for a while because you just had that bandana and you were walking around. It's like, wait, that's Glenn. But yeah, the Russian, some were so like kind of fun, over the top. It was like the whole crew's just jaw would drop. It's like, oh my God.
Thank you. That was fun.
So yeah, a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Rami from the Michigan Daily. This is to Richard, or Rick, I guess. You've kind of built your career off of showing intimacy on screen, whether that be emotional intimacy, romantic intimacy, or sexual intimacy. And that comes in stark contrast to arguably the most sexless and reserved era of Hollywood that we've seen since the Hayes administration.
And
Hayes Code.
self-imposed.
Yeah, which is super strange. So my question is, how do you handle putting intimacy on screen and filming it when sex seems out of vogue?
Well, I don't know if we ever talked about that. There's been a lot of think pieces, and that's been in the air the last couple years, I think. I think people finally, in the superhero era, they kind of don't have sex. So it was kind of like they don't reproduce, I guess. It became the whole culture, a little more sexless in movies. And some people said, like, well, young people they're not necessarily like sex in movies. Young people are like, that's the only reason I went to movies as a young person, is to hopefully see a sex scene. I wouldn't, you can't believe it. So anyway, we got into this, and we're like, this is body heat. I mean, these people are hot for each other. We're talking, there's going to be some fucking in this movie to believe the movie. This isn't, it's like there's something driving them that takes them out there to see on this life and death level. It's like sex, death. It's like, wow, we're going there. For the movie to work, it had to be that way. So I haven't had that much sex in my movies, I think, if you add it all up. But this one, just storytelling.
Do you want me to add to that? No, I'm going to leave that one. Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Okay, we have time for one more. Right here. Yes.
Really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. My question is, I went to a very interesting panel yesterday about sound design, how it affects us without realizing it. Are there things in your film that you either want people to notice or want to affect people without them catching on the first glance?
In the sound design?
It could be anything. Anything you want people to appreciate that may not be immediately obvious.
No, it's all...
It's all there.
Yeah, I'm trying to create like a reality that you accept. I'm not trying to draw any attention to it. It's very subtle, though. It's important. You spend a lot of time on it, but if someone came out and the first thing they said was, hey, a great sound design to your movie, I'd be go.
It might not be.
So I don't make those there are those kind of movies. Action, look at what gets awarded. Those are great sound designs and very necessary. But I don't want anyone thinking about that.
Now I'm nervous about our screening tonight that I'm going to hear that.
Yeah, they go, I saw your movie. Good sound design.
That was the best part. No.
Craft services.
I don't know
like
if that's
it was
much
great.
of an answer. It's a long technical answer.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please wait while Rick and Glenn leave the stage. But while you're doing so, give Richard Linklater and Glen Powell a huge round of applause.
Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you guys. It was fun.
Good talking to you.
Thank you both so much for being here.
This was awesome, man. That was really awesome.